A thin morning mist coils around the jagged stones of the crumbling castle, clinging to the walls like a shroud. It softens the edges of battlements and blunts the cries of the waking world beyond. The distant crow of a raven pierces the silence, a sharp note cutting through the fog, while the clatter of a lone cart on the cobbled lane below echoes like a memory. Each stone seems to exhale centuries of secrets, the damp cold pressing against the skin of the air itself. Here, the castle is not merely abandoned. It is haunted by the weight of its own history. Inside, the halls are a labyrinth of shadow and decay. The walls, streaked with moss and damp, exhale the scent of mildew, mingling with the faint, acrid trace of smoke from torches long extinguished. The silence is thick, almost tangible, broken only by the cautious steps of a solitary servant. She moves as though she were intruding upon ghosts, fingers brushing against rusted iron sconces, lighting candles whose flames shiver and dance, casting flickering light that barely reaches the corners. Every corridor seems to breathe, a living witness to the betrayals and horrors that once threaded through these stones. In the grand hall, the remnants of grandeur speak in muted whispers. A tapestry depicting the triumphs of a long-dead king hangs torn and frayed. Its colors, once blazing with the pomp of victory, now bleed into gray and shadow. Every loose thread hums of secrets buried deep. Oaths broken in candlelit chambers, judgments delayed until they became irrelevant, lives extinguished with the quiet inevitability of winter frost. The room feels less like a hall of kings and more like a tomb of memories, the very air heavy with remorse. One could almost hear the echo of courtly laughter, warped and hollow, lingering like a wound. Outside, the wind bends the skeletal remains of orchard trees, shaking fruit no one will ever taste. The branches claw at the sky as if in accusation, as if nature itself remembers the sins committed behind stone walls. The moat, choked with reeds and brackish water, mirrors the sky's heavy grief. The surface ripples with the faintest touch of a breeze, each wave a silent reminder of what lies submerged and forgotten. A bird lands on the battlements, still and watchful, its eyes tracing the ruined parapets. It is a sentinel, a quiet witness to centuries of hidden guilt, to promises made in blood and forgotten in gold. The servant moves through the hallways like a whisper, passing doorways where shadows twist into unnatural shapes. The floorboards groan beneath her weight, each step a reminder that even stone remembers the weight of human presence. In the corner of a chamber, a rusted sword leans against the wall, its hilt worn smooth by countless hands, a silent testament to battles won and lost. The air carries the faint metallic tang of blood, long washed away but never erased from memory. Here, the castle itself seems alive, its stones murmuring of kings who cloaked cruelty in feasts, who traded justice for comfort, leaving behind only the echo of their choices. Through the arched windows, the rising sun struggles against the mist. Its light is pale and hesitant, falling over walls carved by time and neglect. The castle's silhouette is jagged and accusing, each tower and turret a frozen scream against the heavens. In these halls, the weight of history presses on the soul, and even the most mundane object, an overturned chair, a cracked goblet, carries the gravity of lives interrupted, of stories halted mid-breath. It is a place where the past never fully dies, where each shadow could be a hand reaching out, demanding remembrance. A bell tolls faintly from the ruins of the chapel, a sound more felt than heard, vibrating through stone and bone. It tolls not for the living, but for sins that outlast kings, for judgments deferred until they became ghosts. The notes carry a sorrow so profound that the servant pauses, her hand resting against the cold wall as if bracing herself against it. She is alone, yet surrounded by every whisper the castle has ever held. Her candlelight flickers against the tapestries and portraits, casting long, trembling shadows that almost seem to move with intent, guiding her steps towards secrets that have waited for centuries to be revealed. In the dim light of the hall, the servant glimpses traces of lives long vanished. The carved initials on a doorframe, a wine stain etched into stone, the faint outline of a handprint pressed into plaster. Every mark is a memory, a proof that someone once loved, feared, betrayed, or hoped. The castle is a palimpsest of human emotion, layers of devotion and cruelty, ambition and despair, written over each other until the original stories are barely visible. Yet the residue remains, heavy as incense, impossible to ignore. She reaches the tower stairs, narrow and spiraling, each step a test of courage. The walls here are slick with moisture, and the wind creeps through cracks, carrying the distant cries of creatures that have claimed this fortress as their own. From above, the view of the land beyond is a tapestry of shadow and mist, orchards reaching like brittle fingers toward the horizon, fields lying fallow under the watch of gray skies. From this vantage, one can imagine the lives of kings and peasants alike, intertwined in a web of desire, fear, and necessity. Each window frames a story, each battlement a stage for both honor and treachery. And yet, amidst the decay, there is a stubborn pulse of life. Moss clings stubbornly to stones, small birds flit between broken tiles, and somewhere, water drips from the tower roof into the silent moat. It is a reminder that time continues, indifferent to power and cruelty, indifferent even to memory. The castle may house echoes, but the world beyond moves forward, carrying with it the residue of these stories, the lessons hidden in silence, the truths whispered in mist. The servant pauses at the highest battlement, candle in hand, staring out at the horizon where sky and earth bleed into one another. She senses the weight of the stories she will carry, the duty to remember what was lived and lost. Below, the orchard sways, the reeds in the moat tremble, and the distant bell tolls again, resonant and mournful. Every note seems to gather the sins, the hopes, the betrayals, and the fleeting triumphs of the past, binding them into a single, haunting rhythm. In this moment, the castle is not merely stone and ruin. It is memory made flesh, a living testament to the fragile, turbulent pulse of human ambition. And as the mist curls higher, swallowing battlements and towers alike, the servant's gaze lingers on a shadowed corner of the courtyard. Something unspoken waits there, a story ready to unfold, a secret that demands to be unearthed. The castle exhales a final, trembling sigh, and the wind carries it outward, over orchard, moat, and crumbling walls. It is a breath of history, a call to witness what has been hidden too long. And so, the stage is set for what comes next. A tale of ambition, loyalty, and the echo of sins that refuse to die. Rain hammers the slate roof, each droplet a muted drumbeat against the rotting timbers. The wind shudders through splintered windows, tugging at curtains that have not seen sunlight for decades. Inside, the remnants of a once grand throne room gleam with fleeting reflections, water pooling in the cracks of the stone floor like miniature mirrors to a kingdom now dissolved. Every puddle seems to hold a story, a whisper of a crown, a fragment of silk, a memory of gold corroded by neglect and the slow decay of ambition. A young scribe kneels at a broken desk, his hands trembling, ink smudging across parchment as if the words themselves fear permanence. His eyes dart constantly to the shadows, as though the absent monarch might emerge from the gloom. Yet the king has long been devoured by his own hunger for power, leaving only echoes of desire behind. The scent of wet earth and decayed banners rises around him, mingling with the acrid tang of extinguished torches. The smell is a confession in itself, a testament to feasts uneaten, alliances broken, and vows whispered in the dark. Somewhere above, the king's private chambers remain locked. Behind those doors lie secret ledgers, silver cups tarnished with age, letters that drip with whispered betrayals. Every object is a relic of ambition and fear, a frozen heartbeat of deeds too perilous to name. The scribe imagines the king here, even if only in spirit, sitting, always observing, calculating, weighing each man's life as though it were a coin to be spent. Outside, the wind tears at the remnants of a once proud banner, now a ragged confession flapping against stone. Its threads a frail memory of a kingdom that believed itself eternal. A stray hound wanders the overgrown courtyard, nose pressed to the damp cobblestones, sniffing traces of candle grease and wine spilled in clandestine meetings. Each step of its paw echoes through the empty corridors, a drumbeat in the memory of ghosts. The scribe pauses midline, quill hovering over parchment, feeling the weight of history pressing down. It is a living weight, silent yet insistent, carved into the stone of walls, the grain of timbers, the rotting banners. In the flickering light of a single guttering candle, his shadow stretches long across the floor, trembling as though the house itself were warning him of the fragile bridge between confession and concealment. He breathes in, tasting the metallic tang of ink mixed with the damp air, and writes. Every word is an offering, a plea to memory itself. Let them not forget. He seems to say, though he knows memory is selective, cruel, and will often betray. Outside, the storm swells, wind screaming through the narrow arrow slits. Gray light pours like judgment upon the cobblestones, illuminating the puddles that reflect not the sky, but the fractured past of a realm held together by ambition and fear. The scribe's eyes linger on the walls where tapestries once hung, now shredded, exposing raw stone like wounds too stubborn to heal. A sudden gust flings the door open, sending a chill that makes him shiver. He crouches lower, quill poised midair, aware that these walls have listened to whispers that were never meant for human ears. He imagines the clandestine conversations, a hand brushing against another in secret, a whispered promise, a dagger concealed under velvet sleeves. The very stones seem to hum with the weight of secrets, and the scribe knows he is both chronicler and captive of these shadows. Each line he writes is a step deeper into the labyrinth of human desire and folly, where kings and commoners alike are bound by the same relentless hunger for survival. He stops for a moment, letting the silence stretch, broken only by the wind and the drip of water from the eaves. In that pause, he sees faces in the shadows, courtiers whose smiles were knives, soldiers whose loyalty was bought in silver, a queen whose eyes held both hope and despair. History is not a straight line, he realizes. It is a tapestry of betrayals, small and grand, stitched together with ambition and fear. The scribe feels the weight of this tapestry pressing down, threads snagging on his conscience, pulling him into a world where even truth has a cost. Lightning splits the sky, illuminating the courtyard in stark, fleeting clarity. The hound freezes, ears pricked, then resumes its wanderings, oblivious to the human dramas etched into the stones around it. The scribe's hand moves faster now, as if chasing the ghost of truth, trying to capture what cannot be captured. His ink runs, smearing, but he does not stop. Every smudge is a mark of life lived too quickly, too recklessly, a reminder that even in decay, memory demands witness. He leans closer to the candle, its flame dancing and sputtering against the draft. Shadows leap across the walls, forming grotesque silhouettes, mocking his task, yet giving it a strange, mournful beauty. He writes not just for the living, but for the absent. For the king whose ambition poisoned him, for the courtiers who plotted in silence, for the soldiers who died for causes they never understood. Each word is an attempt to resurrect them, to grant them a fleeting immortality within the parchment, though the storm outside reminds him how easily the world forgets. The wind shifts, carrying the distant toll of a bell from the village beyond the walls, a reminder that time has moved on without this crumbling fortress. Yet here, in this room of echoes, the past and present collide. The scribe's fear, the ghost's resentment, the remnants of grandeur decaying in silence. He feels the pulse of history beneath his fingers, and it is both terrifying and intoxicating. Every line, every mark, every hesitation of his quill is a heartbeat against the darkness, a quiet rebellion against oblivion. Finally, he lowers his quill, the words on the page glistening with wet ink like tiny pools of memory. The candle flickers, throwing one last shadow across the room. He knows he cannot capture it all. Too many whispers, too many betrayals, but he has begun the work, and that is enough. He rises slowly, feeling the chill of the stone floor through his knees, and glances toward the king's chambers, still locked, still full of secrets that might never see daylight. The storm outside begins to ease, though rain continues its endless percussion, a relentless reminder that the world moves on, even as walls crumble and banners rot. As he steps toward the door, the hound follows, a silent companion in this mausoleum of memory. The courtyard lies before him, empty yet alive with echoes of ambition, fear, and forgotten loyalty. The scribe glances back one last time at the candle guttering in the corner, at the trembling shadow of his hand, and for a moment, the fortress seems to sigh, a mournful, living thing acknowledging the bridge he has built between confession and concealment. Beyond the walls, the storm has softened, gray light now mingling with the first hesitant rays of dawn. Somewhere, in the distance, a new chapter waits to be written, and the ghosts of the past will follow, patient, watching, never forgiving. The first rays of sun strike the fractured walls, turning stones to molten amber, and in that brief, trembling light, the towers reveal themselves as jagged teeth, their tips eroded by centuries of wind and neglect. Each stone whispers a memory of the hands that laid it, of the men who swore oaths upon them, and of the blood that was spilled in their shadow. Shadows crawl across the courtyard like cautious predators, stretching long and thin across the mossy flagstones, as if reluctant to touch the echoes buried beneath. Inside the chapel, shafts of light pierce the dust-filled air, catching on shards of painted glass that cling stubbornly to their frames, fragments of color still vibrant in defiance of decay. The noblewoman moves slowly along the nave, her threadbare velvet whispering against cold stone, each step stirring the ghosts of prayers and schemes long dissolved into silence. Her fingers trace the carved pulpit, feeling the ridges left by hands that knelt and plotted with equal devotion. The scent of incense, faded and sweet, lingers stubbornly, mingling with the earthy rot that has claimed the wooden pews, a perfume of abandonment that fills the lungs and presses against the chest. Outside, the gardens have become wilderness, a riot of green and brown where nature exacts a slow vengeance. Vines crawl up fractured statues, each tendril gripping marble with patient persistence. The sweet scent of wildflowers battles against the pungent decay of rotting leaves, a reminder that even in ruin, life insists upon itself. The noblewoman steps carefully among the fallen branches and tangled roots, each footfall a disturbance in a world that has learned to be still. The echoes of past laughter drift faintly on the wind, carried from walls that once rang with music and revelry, now hollow, resonating only with the faint tremor of memory. Bells that once summoned faithful voices to mass now hang silent, their bronze dulled and streaked with rain and rust. The noblewoman pauses beneath one, its hollow interior yawning like an open mouth, imagining the hands that rang it, the voices that answered, now long vanished. Somewhere, A single raven croaks, and its cry shatters the silence, startling a flock of pigeons into frantic flight. Their wings beat against the slate roofs like the pulse of a buried conscience, a reminder that even in decay, the world moves and breathes, indifferent to human ambition. In the courtyard, statues lean at impossible angles, their limbs broken, faces chipped, eyes that once demanded devotion now hollow sockets staring at nothing. Ivy claims each one with deliberate patience, wrapping marble in slow conquest, a quiet triumph of time over pride. The noblewoman pauses before a bricked-up doorway, her fingers brushing the uneven mortar. Behind it, she imagines the secrets trapped in shadow, letters soaked in ink and blood, bribes handed in trembling hands, sins that no confession could ever wash away. She feels the weight of centuries pressing in, each wall a silent witness to deeds unspoken, crimes unatoned, lives extinguished yet lingering in the dust. The air trembles with memory. A feast once spread across this very courtyard, laughter spilling like wine, the clink of goblets and the rustle of silk. She can almost hear it, the low murmur of courtiers whispering plots and betrayals, the king's laughter booming across the stones, filled with both cruelty and charm. And yet now, only silence reigns, thick and heavy, pressing against the chest like a stone. Every footstep seems sacrilegious, every breath a disruption of the equilibrium that centuries of neglect have wrought. In a narrow corridor, the noblewoman hears a scuff of a rat's foot, and she imagines the corridor alive once more with whispered confessions, hurried footsteps, and the hush of clandestine meetings. She pictures the servants scurrying with secrets wrapped in cloth, the scribes recording every act of ambition, every betrayal inked into scrolls that no one dares touch now. The walls remember, and their memory is patient, eternal, and merciless. A single window, cracked and weeping with rain, frames the morning sun in fractured beams, casting the chapel floor in a mosaic of light and shadow. The noblewoman kneels briefly, though not in prayer, but in communion with the ghosts of all who have knelt here before her. She can feel their fear, their hope, their hunger, as if it were transmitted through the stone itself. Each whisper of wind through broken glass, each creak of a loosened beam, is a syllable in the endless story of this place. A story of power, of devotion, and of the inevitability of decline. The gardens stir with the quiet insistence of life. A fox slips through the undergrowth, ears pricked, alert to every sound. A bird settles on the twisted branch of a dead tree, shaking its feathers free of dew. The noblewoman watches, and for a moment, she imagines herself as these creatures, survivors of a ruin they did not cause, moving silently through a world that has forgotten them. The wind carries the scent of damp earth and distant sea, of moss and ancient stone, a mingling that tastes of eternity. She returns to the chapel, and the silence is heavier now, filled with an almost tangible anticipation, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath, waiting for someone to remember what has been lost. A candle, long snuffed, leans crookedly in its holder, wax hardened into strange, twisting shapes, like the fingers of those who once reached toward heaven and ambition alike. The noblewoman brushes against it, and a fragment falls, breaking softly on the stone. The sound is startling in its rarity, a punctuation in the long sentence of absence. She moves toward the courtyard once more, her shadow stretching long and thin, merging with the darkness that clings to the corners. A statue tilts further, threatening collapse, yet remains steadfast, a sentinel to history's cruelty. The day stretches forward, unyielding, as if the walls themselves were measuring time not in hours, but in sins committed and forgotten. Every stone, every echo, every shadow insists on its memory, a relentless litany of what once was and what will never be again. Above her, the sky deepens, sunlight breaking through cloud in fleeting, golden shards. The noblewoman lifts her gaze to the fractured towers, their jagged peaks reaching for a sky that does not bend to human will. Somewhere, far off, a horn sounds, faint, mournful, reminding her that the world beyond this ruin moves on, carrying its own secrets, its own betrayals, and its own unrecorded acts of courage. And yet here, in this moment, she is alone with the weight of centuries, with the living and the dead intertwined in the breath of dust, the creak of timber, the scent of decay and bloom. The day wanes and shadows stretch long across the gardens, filling the air with a golden melancholy. The noblewoman pauses one last time at the bricked-up doorway, pressing her hand against the cold, rough surface, imagining the secrets that lie beyond, forgotten, forbidden, yet alive in memory. A raven croaks again, and the sound reverberates across the courtyard, carrying with it a reminder that the world is patient, that it remembers, and that no stone, no shadow, and no silence can ever fully conceal what has been done. As she turns to leave, the wind lifts a fallen leaf, spinning it into the air, a small, defiant life amidst the ruin. And in that simple motion, there is a promise or perhaps a warning, that even in decay, even in the silence of centuries, the past is never truly dead. It waits, always, to be seen, remembered, and reckoned with. A bitter wind threads its way through the crumbling battlements, carrying the resinous scent of distant pine and the sharp tang of salt from a river long diverted, once feeding the castle's moat. It whispers through arrow slits and broken windows, teasing the echoes of footsteps long silenced. The towers rise like accusing fingers against a slate-gray sky, rigid and unyielding, monuments to ambition that has rotted from the inside. Each stone seems to lean toward the other, as though conspiring to share its secrets with the wind. Somewhere above, a crow lifts off, feathers slicing through the cold, hollow air, its cry a jagged note in the symphony of emptiness. Inside, the corridors stretch into shadow, twisting and narrowing, lined with broken shields, chipped stones, and the ghosts of battles whose victories were hollowed by betrayal. The air tastes faintly of damp, of time itself seeping from walls. A caretaker, once a soldier, moves quietly among the debris. The scrape of worn leather boots against stone rings loud in the silence, a solitary percussion that keeps company with the ghosts. His breath clouds in the cold, and each exhalation seems to stir the memories embedded in the walls. Silent screams, whispered prayers, unspoken promises. Faded tapestries hang limp against the stones, hunting scenes and feasts now smudged and dull. The painted faces of kings and nobles staring with unblinking accusation. The hunters bow bows no more. The banquet's laughter has turned to dust. Yet, in the fabric's muted colors, the life of this place persists like a wound refusing to heal. Shadows cling to the folds, gathering around each embroidered detail as if mourning the grandeur they once framed. Here, power once breathed. Now it merely exhales a hollow wind that rattles the doorways and shakes the candle flames that stubbornly cling to life. The kitchens are no sanctuary. Rusted pots hang above cold hearths where flames no longer dance, and the scent of smoke and spices is a memory pressed into iron. A trace of lives who once stirred, chopped, and bled within this stone heart. The caretaker's hand brushes a sooty wall, feeling the ghostly warmth of a meal that will never return. He imagines the laughter of cooks, the clatter of knives on boards, the quiet sorrow of servants pressed into corners as whispers of conspiracies passed overhead. Every detail whispers. A child hidden beneath barrels of wine, a lover's letter swallowed by fire, a dagger pressed to a trusting chest in the dead of night. In the courtyard, puddles form in the uneven stones, shallow mirrors of sky and ruin. Each ripple distorts the reflection, twisting the memory of triumph into a dance with terror. Here, the castle's ambition once thrummed with life. The clang of training swords, the march of soldiers, the pageantry of banners snapping in the wind. Now, silence rules, broken only by the occasional caw of the crows wheeling overhead. Their black wings blot out the sun for a fleeting instant, a reminder that even the smallest shadow can claim dominion when the giants have fallen. The caretaker pauses, boots sinking slightly into the mud, listening. Not just to the wind or the cries of birds, but to the hollow echo of his own heartbeat bouncing back from the walls. He feels the weight of centuries pressing against his chest. This castle does not merely house the past. It remembers it. It catalogs grief, greed, betrayal, and fleeting courage with the slow precision of stone and mortar. Each step is a confession, each breath an acknowledgement that what is lost is never entirely gone, that every betrayal leaves its imprint on the bones of the world. A sudden gust slams a door shut, and the sound ricochets through the halls like a gunshot, startling and final. Dust stirs in the corners, motes floating like trapped souls illuminated by the pale morning light slicing through broken windows. The caretaker touches a shattered shield, tracing the gouges with his fingers. He imagines the hand that swung the sword, the scream that followed, the silence that claimed the body afterward. There is no honor here now, only memory, and the castle absorbs it all, swallowing pride and despair alike. Up in the towers, the wind hums a mournful tune through the cracks, carrying with it the stories of kings and usurpers, of promises made and broken. He recalls the tales of the lords who claimed dominion over men and land, only to be undone by the quiet treachery of shadows, by the patient patience of stones that remember. A tapestry flutters with an unseen draft, the image of a noblewoman reaching for a chalice in mid-feast, forever caught between hope and ruin. Time has stretched her expression into something eternal, a witness not to victory, but to the slow decay of power. In the lowest dungeons, the stone presses cold and merciless. Chains hang empty, swinging with the memory of captives long gone. The caretaker runs a hand along the wall, feeling grooves where hands clutched for life, nails scraped against stone. Whispers murmured into the darkness that was thick enough to smother prayer. He imagines the fear, the hunger, the despair that soaked into these walls, and feels it seep into his own bones. Here, human will is nothing against the persistence of memory, and the castle is patient, impartial, and implacable. By the river, just beyond the castle's fallen walls, water laps at the bank, carrying away silt, secrets, and the faint echoes of 1,000 footfalls. The wind lifts the surface, sending ripples across the reflection of towers that no longer command dominion, but only witness decay. The caretaker steps back from the edge, gaze fixed on the distorted reflection, as if staring into the soul of history itself. Every ripple seems to ask a question. Who remembers when the rulers have all turned to dust? Who mourns the ambition that could not withstand its own weight? And yet, amid the decay, there is a pulse, a quiet insistence of life. Small green shoots push through cracks in the courtyard, crows nest in the battlements, and the river carries seeds to distant lands. The castle exhales a shivering lament, but it is not yet silent. Even kings cannot hide their sins from time, but the stones bear witness, indifferent and eternal. The caretaker moves on, boots echoing softly, carrying both the weight of history and the fragile hope that memory itself may endure. A shadow falls across the wall, long and jagged, as a cloud passes overhead. The caretaker pauses once more, listening to the sigh of the castle, the whisper of the river, the call of the wind through broken towers. Each sound is a story, each silence a warning. He realizes that though the past may be dead, its echo lingers, and the next chapter waits in the air, in the stones, in the hearts of those who dare to walk these halls. The castle has breathed in centuries of life and sorrow, and as he steps forward, he knows it will exhale again. The wind carries the scent of pine, salt, and cold stone as the caretaker disappears into the shadowed corridors. The castle, patient and immovable, watches and remembers, ready to reveal its secrets to the next seeker who dares to listen. Somewhere above, a crow caws, circling, tracing the history etched into every battlement, every stone. And the stones whisper, nothing truly dies here. Not ambition, not betrayal, not love, not loss. They wait, enduring, silent, eternal. Frost clings stubbornly to the wooden beams of the Lord's hall, each icicle trembling in the weak touch of dawn. The first pale light stretches across the courtyard, glinting off sharpened iron spikes that crown the gates like silent sentinels, a warning to any who might trespass. The wind carries a chill that bites through the woolen cloaks of villagers, their breaths fogging in ghostly tendrils as they shuffle toward the heart of the manor. From somewhere high above, the bell tolls, its sound low and relentless, rolling across frozen fields like a voice of judgment that cannot be ignored. In the yard, a man kneels before a wheel. His hands, locked in iron cuffs, clatter faintly with every restless movement. His back is arched, skin pale, raw from previous torments, and the cold has begun to settle deep into his bones. Guards in polished armor stand rigid around him, statues carved from steel and discipline, their shadows stretching long and unyielding across the straw-strewn ground. The smell of damp straw mixes with iron and the acrid tang of burning pitch, creating a haze that sits heavy in the morning air. From the kitchens, faint wafts of bread rise, warm and sweet, a fragile reminder of life continuing just beyond this crucible of fear. High in a narrow window, a young girl presses her fingers to the cold sill. She leans forward wide-eyed, absorbing every snap of leather, every clang of chains, as if the courtyard itself has become a grim classroom. The wheel, with its slow, deliberate turning, seems to speak a language older than speech. Every creak, every groan of the wooden spokes against metal, is a line of this cruel manuscript, punishment etched in flesh and memory. Yet, in her imagination, the wheel becomes something more than an instrument of pain. It becomes a mirror of the invisible constraints she feels in her own life, the ropes and expectations that bind her in ways no iron could. A sudden cry rends the chill, a wordless scream that trembles in the still air. The man on the wheel draws in a shuddering breath, and the girl flinches, clutching the sill as if she could absorb some of his pain into herself. The guards barely stir. Their eyes are iron mirrors reflecting obedience, not pity. The wheel turns again, inexorably, and the rhythm of punishment sets the pace of the morning. Each rotation presses a lesson into the marrow. Obedience, endurance, the subtle terror that keeps the order of the world from unraveling. And yet, amid this tapestry of dread, life whispers. A raven lifts from the gatehouse, wings scraping the frozen air, its cry slicing through the monotony of suffering. Somewhere nearby, a mother murmurs encouragement to a child hiding behind a wall, her words trembling but unbroken. Even the smallest of creatures, mice darting beneath piles of straw, the trembling breath of the kneeling man, the girl's silent heartbeat, refuse to yield entirely to fear. In these moments, the courtyard becomes a stage where power and fragility meet, where terror and hope twist together like smoke from the hearth. The turning of the wheel is both a physical and a symbolic motion. Each groaning spoke marks time. Each snap of rope and chain punctuates the story of authority. The man's eyes glaze over with pain, yet they also flicker with something stubborn, unspoken, a refusal to let his spirit be wholly extinguished. Around him, shadows dance as torches flicker in the morning light, and the cold iron gleams like dark poetry. Every observer, villager, soldier, child, absorbs the lesson differently. Some in fear, some in sorrow, some in silent defiance. And each will carry this moment forward, like the invisible lines of frost that etch the beams above. The girl at the window imagines the wheels turning as a rhythm of life itself, cycles of suffering and endurance repeating through generations. She wonders what power it might hold over her own choices, her own dreams. The courtyard, with its stench of pitch and iron, with its cold and clammy walls, becomes more than a place of punishment. It becomes a crucible of understanding. She sees that even in the harshest crucibles, subtle forms of resistance can survive. A whispered prayer, a glance of solidarity, a small act of kindness. These are the sparks that persist in the shadows, the soft embers that the wheel cannot crush. Voices rise and fall. The man groans. The guards murmur orders. The girl imagines conversations that will never reach her ears. The wheel turns yet again, and time stretches, distorted by pain and observation. The wind carries the faint echoes of prayers, of curses, of stories that no chronicler will record, but that shape the lives of all who witnessed them. The sun climbs higher, glinting off the iron spikes, casting fractured patterns across frozen earth, transforming the courtyard into a shifting landscape of light and shadow, cruelty and endurance. At last, the ritual reaches its pause. The wheel slows. The guards step back, their polished armor gleaming, but their faces remain unreadable. The man collapses onto the straw, chest heaving, hands trembling in the iron cuffs. Fear has left its mark, deep and vivid, yet so has endurance. The girl lingers at the window, watching the final movements, feeling the tension lift slightly, as if the morning itself exhales. Her mind teems with questions she cannot yet answer. What binds a man to obedience, and yet allows his spirit to resist? How does one survive cruelty and yet retain a sense of humanity? In the spaces between the echoes of leather and the hiss of chains, life asserts itself. The raven circles once more, a solitary witness above the courtyard. A mother's whisper continues, faint but persistent, carried by the wind. The girl imagines herself stepping beyond the window, beyond the rigid boundaries of walls and authority, into a world shaped not only by fear but also by the quiet, unbreakable will to endure. And as the sun finally warms the frost-covered beams, a new rhythm begins. A rhythm not of punishment alone, but of observation, reflection, and the slow, deliberate cultivation of hope beneath the stern gaze of power. The courtyard empties gradually. The wheel stands still, silent and foreboding, yet its lesson lingers like the cold in the bones of those who have seen it. The man, bruised and exhausted, drifts toward some semblance of composure, while the girl's fingers remain curled against the window frame, trembling with the weight of understanding. Somewhere in the distance, the bell tolls again, softer now, a pulse in the quiet air. And in that stillness, in the fragile balance between fear and resilience, the story waits to unfold further. Another lesson, another struggle, another turn of the wheel, in the relentless cycle of survival and witness. The frost clings to window panes, etching delicate lace across cracked glass. Each shard glitters like a fragment of memory, frozen in a whisper of time, while a thin curl of smoke rises from a hearth where embers fight against the cold with feeble resistance. The air trembles with the scent of damp stone, of charred wood long since surrendered to winter, and the faint tang of ink from scrolls that no hand has unrolled in decades. Shadows stretch across the great hall, fingers of darkness curling over rusted armor and tarnished silver, pausing for a moment on a chair where a king once sat, weighing mercy against ambition. A boy moves quietly, careful not to disturb the echoes of a past that still lingers in the bones of the castle. His steps are hushed, swallowed by the cavernous space, yet each footfall awakens whispers of revelries long gone. The clash of goblets, the clamor of feasts where roasted meats steamed on carved tables, the laughter that hid the knife of betrayal beneath smiles. He imagines the halls alive once more, golden candlelight dancing against the banners that now hang tattered, threads unraveling like the ambitions they once proclaimed. Through a collapsed wall, moonlight spills into the ruin, illuminating the skeletal remains of a garden. Fountains lie shattered, water frozen in jagged spikes of ice, and trees, stripped bare, stretch their branches skyward like hands grasping for mercy. The boy steps closer, fingertips brushing a statue weathered by centuries, the cold stone pressing into his skin as if it remembers every oath broken and every crown claimed in shadow. The statue's eyes, hollowed by time, seem to hold the quiet rage of kings who wore wisdom like a mask while cruelty lingered in their hands. In the distance, a bell tolls once, hollow and slow, each chime a pulse in the chest of the castle. It speaks not of celebration but of absence, of justice abandoned, of voices silenced by ambition. The boy lifts his gaze to the towers, their jagged silhouettes clawing at the night sky, monuments to dreams devoured by the rot of time. Every stone seems to murmur secrets, of knights who swore loyalty and then vanished into legend, of maids and squires who vanished under the weight of fear. The silence here is not emptiness. It is a living presence, pressing close, heavy with unspoken confessions, with the quiet suffering of those who lived and died under roofs that now drip only icicles. A crow lands nearby, its black feathers ruffling against frost, a sudden breath of life in a place long surrendered to shadow. Its eyes, dark as the spaces between stars, regard the boy with something older than knowledge, an understanding of histories written in blood, of ambitions carved into stone, of promises that crumble like ash. The boy shivers, but not from the cold. He feels the weight of the past pressing through the frost, brushing against his skin with fingers of wind, whispering the secrets of those who walked these halls before him. He moves deeper into the great hall, his boots crunching on debris. A broken chair leans against a wall, its wood splintered and damp, and near it, a tapestry sags, its colors faded into memory. Once it depicted a battle, knights with lances poised against one another, banners snapping in imagined wind. Now, it is a ghost, threads unraveling in the icy draft, a map of what was lost, of kingdoms imagined and swallowed by the slow, patient hand of time. The boy traces a hand over the tapestry, feeling the uneven texture, as if the threads themselves might whisper a story if pressed close enough to an ear. The hearth smoke curls upward, carrying with it the scent of forgotten meals and burnt offerings. He imagines the kitchens alive, fires roaring, cooks swearing under the heat of fat and flame, the clatter of knives echoing like distant thunder. And somewhere beyond these walls, he hears, perhaps only in his mind, the echo of voices, laughter mingled with cries, deals struck with sharp smiles, and the soft gasp of those caught unawares. It is a music of fear and desire, a rhythm older than the boy, older than the castle, that plays across the stones and the frozen garden, across the torn banners and splintered statues. He climbs a narrow stair, the stones worn smooth by centuries of feet, the cold biting at his fingers as he grips the railing. At the top, the view opens to the battlements. The wind is sharp, carrying flakes of snow that sting his cheeks, and he imagines the men who once stood here, eyes scanning the horizon, swords clenched, hearts heavy with both courage and dread. They looked outward, toward the lands they claimed, toward the enemy whose name would be whispered in horror, and inward, to the secrets they carried, the choices that would haunt them even in death. The moonlight falls across a crumbling tower, painting it silver and black, revealing windows like dark eyes staring into eternity. The boy steps closer, feeling the rough stone under his palms, and senses the lives imprinted here. Not the lives of kings or generals, but the quiet, persistent pulse of those who served, who whispered prayers into the cracks, who hid their children and their desires in corners that no chronicler ever named. History, he realizes, is not written only in victories, but in the tremor of daily survival, in the hushed courage that flickers behind fear. A gust of wind sweeps through the open battlement, rattling the remnants of shutters and sending a cascade of frost along the parapets. The boy wraps his cloak tighter, but it is not warmth he seeks. It is the knowledge that he is not alone. Every shadow seems alive, every whisper a thread connecting him to those who came before, to those who will follow. The castle itself breathes, inhaling centuries of grief, ambition, and fleeting joy, exhaling memories that cling to his hair, to his fingertips, to the soles of his boots. He pauses at the edge of the tower, gazing down at the shattered garden below. Moonlight glints on frozen fountains, on skeletal trees that sway even in the stillness, and he imagines the hands that built this place, the voices that laughed and wept, the secrets that stained its walls. He wonders which of these echoes he will carry with him, which will settle like dust in his chest. And in that moment, the castle feels less like stone and more like a living chronicle, a vessel of memory, waiting for someone to listen, waiting for the past to speak through the frost, the wind, and the lingering shadow of ambition unfulfilled. The crow caws once, loud and sharp, breaking the spell, and the boy turns back toward the great hall. Each step downward is deliberate, a communion with the weight of history pressing around him, and yet there is a strange hope here, too. A hope that stories, even fractured and frozen, will endure, that the frost, the shadows, and the silence might yield their secrets, if only someone listens with the patience of the night itself. And as he descends, the bell tolls again, a hollow echo that carries both warning and promise, leading him forward through corridors where stone remembers, and where the next chapter waits, shrouded in frost, in shadow, and in the quiet heartbeat of a place that has seen everything and forgotten nothing. The tower itself seemed alive, groaning and shifting with the weight of its own history. Moss clung to cracks in the stone, and centuries of wind had hollowed the floors, making every step a perilous gamble. Chains rattled with each swing of the bells, metal striking stone in a sound both alarming and beautiful, echoing like distant thunder. The ringer knew the danger intimately. A slip, a misstep, a sudden jolt of the rope could send him plunging into darkness. Yet danger was never merely a threat. It was the rhythm of existence here. To live meant to confront risk, to embrace it as part of daily devotion. And so he climbed higher, pulled harder, and never allowed fear to quiet the bell's voice. From below, the townspeople paused to listen. Merchants with dirt-caked hands lifted heads from their stalls. Mothers hushed children mid-cry, and the old prayed with eyes closed, imagining the pealing sound like a bridge from their small lives to the heavens above. To them, the bell was a guardian, invisible yet present.